Hey, what's up, you guys? This is Quinlan with Oxygen Beats. It's good to see you guys again in this month's VIP pack. For last month's pack, I had a video which went over creating your own 808s. I specifically used Massive, but you can apply all the principles to whatever VST you prefer. So last month, I said I would go over mixing the 808s with the rest of the track and how to automate it. And so I've put together like an 8-bar loop right here, which has some pretty traditional trap elements to it, just so I can show you guys how to mix this. So I'm going to play the track. As you guys can hear, there are some spots with the bass where it carries a long time, and then I've done a lot of pitch bending on the actual bass. And so these are things that you'd have a very hard time doing with just like a sample. So even though there are a lot of great times to use samples, this is an example of a time where you'd want to just synthesize it yourself. I'm going to go over the automation for this. So here's what the instance of Massive looks like. If you didn't get the tutorial last month, you should see about getting that, because there's a lot of useful information on creating your own 808s. And this is pretty much just a variation of some stuff I showed you guys in the last month's kit. Something that really scares a lot of people is automation, and there's really nothing to be scared of. When you have a synth, so in this case, Massive, usually are automating things, but just more automatically. So like this right here, this one, and you can see the little blue line right here. That means it's automating the pitch with an envelope. And so basically every synth sound that you use is going to incorporate some sort of automation. I think it's just a little bit scary to see it on the actual project view or the timeline view for some people, just because you're not used to it. And when you see a lot of like lines and stuff, it can be intimidating, but really these all have a rhyme and reason. Okay, so this automation track right here is automating the amplitude of oscillator 3. Oscillator 3 in this instance is the second harmonic. And that second harmonic it adds some mid-range to the sounds. And it also kind of changes the timbre a bit. But I've automated the level to duck down when the pitch is higher. And the reason for that is just when there were higher notes, the second harmonic was just too much. It was too much upper frequency. And so that kind of took away the balance of the bass. So you can see right here, as the notes go up, I've dropped the level down on that. So this second automation track right here is automating the decay time for envelope number 1. Envelope number 1 is routed to all 3 oscillators for the pitch. The envelope 1 is causing a little bit of a thud or a drop in the pitch just at the beginning of the sound. And so I've automated it so that on the higher notes, similar to the last track, on the higher notes, it drops down a bit. So it's going to be a faster, snappier decay time the higher the notes are. And this is because we kind of want to avoid staying high pitch for very long, and the higher pitch the notes are, the faster we need that decay time to be. So this third automation track right here is simply automating the volume. So I wanted just a little bit of an extra thud at the beginning of the sounds, and I had already reached my limitations to control the volume inside the actual VSTI. And I also have a distortion plugin on the effects chain, as you can see over here. And when you have distortion, it usually will crunch up and compress the volume. So I kind of wanted to undo that, and this happens after the effects chain. So I decided to automate it this way. And this is really not it's not as complicated as it looks. So it's simply just this curve right here every time a new note hits. So you can see it lines up with each new hit. So to do that, I just took the curve and I just copied and pasted it where I needed to. Hopefully that gives you guys an idea of my thought process behind all this automation. You guys can automate more things than just this, and you guys don't have to automate specifically everything I automated. The point is there's really a sound that you're trying to get, and basically don't be afraid to automate anything that you need to automate to get that sound. If you need to drop the volume at a certain spot, then don't be afraid to just automate the volume dropping at that certain spot. But now I'd like to go over just how I mixed the bass. So I'm going to solo this. And now I'm going to show you guys what it sounds like without all the plugins. And it's going to be like super quiet because I actually played around with the distortion as I was making the sound in the VSTI. So yeah, you'll hear. Okay, so there's almost nothing except for like the thud that you can hear. But when we turn on this distortion, you'll hear it. As you can hear, the distortion adds a lot of character to the sound, and it also brings up those levels. I think I added this compressor just to make it just a little bit louder because I had already reached the limit in the VST. Yeah. Okay, so then we get to this dynamics module plugin right here via Isotope. And all this is really doing is it's controlling and ducking down the mid-range a little bit. It's not doing anything in any of these other bands. And so I just, the mid-range on this bass was just a little bit too high. And so I was just backing that off. So if we look at this oscilloscope, and I've soloed the mid-range, so here's what it sounds like with the plugin. And here's what it sounds like without. Okay, so it's not a huge difference, but I just thought that there was a little bit too much mid-range. It was taking away from the punch of the kick, so that's why I backed that off a little bit. Okay, the next plugin we have here is an EQ, and this is just cutting off all the upper frequencies. And so when we have trap beats, we usually don't keep a whole lot of the very upper frequencies in the 808s because if we kept like all the upper frequencies like from the distortion and stuff, the bass would sound a lot more full, but there would be a lot less room in the actual beat for other instruments. There'd be less room for vocals, and basically, I mean, the bass would just be like the whole track almost. So I guess it depends on your project. If your bass is basically like the only thing there, then I guess you have more room to leave some upper frequency stuff in there. But if you plan on having a bunch of other sounds in your mix that are going to be in that upper frequency range, and if you want to make more room for vocals, it's best to just cut out the upper frequency. And so right here, you can see I did a pretty hard cut because I really wanted to capture everything below about 1K. And about from 500 to 2K, I still wanted to have it in there, but I just didn't want it quite as loud, so that's why you see this curve right here. So here's what it sounds like with the plugin. And so here's what it sounds like again without it. Okay, so depending on your taste, that could have sounded better without the plugin. But the thing is that we want to make room for other instruments, like I've already said. And so a lot of times sounds will sound like great by themselves because they're really nice and full, but that comes at the cost of not having any room for other instruments. And so it's a tricky thing because usually the sounds we like the most are the ones that sound really full. And so we select sounds based on that, and then we try to mix it with other sounds, and then there's never room for them all to work together. So really quick, I should say that in trap, when we have the kicks and the 808s, we really want them to blend together, almost like they're, you know, one continuous sound. A lot of people who aren't into production commonly just mistake them for the exact same sound. And when they do that, that means that the mix is good because you really want it to be like one sound. And so the reason I'm talking about that right now is I did this big EQ cut on the bass, but my kick has a lot of upper frequency in it. Since I cut out all that upper frequency to the bass, I did something similar to the kick. I gave it a little bit more upper frequency sound because it has to have that I want to have a little bit of a click, but at the same time I still want it to blend with the 808 bass. I also gave it a little bit more of some punch right here. And so here's how it sounds with that EQ curve. So another little thing I should add really quick while I'm on the subject is that the kick isn't really going to sound like super awesome, amazing by itself usually for trap beats, because usually the kick is designed to go with the 808. And when you have an 808 and you're making a trap beat, you want a short kick, and usually, like I said, usually the kick's not going to sound super awesome by itself, but you want a short kick. And if you have a long kick with a lot of like residual bass, that might sound fine by itself. But if you try to play the kick and the 808 at the same time, there's going to be too much sub frequency there. They're going to be competing with each other. They're going to start canceling each other out. It's going to sound really phasey and it's going to sound really, I guess, muddy would be the word. If they are actually in tune with each other, which is pretty rare, then they'll add together and then they could clip and distort, which is something you don't want. Basically, all I'm saying is make sure you get a short kick if you're trying to blend a kick with an 808. So just a few more things I should go over when mixing the kick with the 808s is sometimes with the short kick, even when it's short, as opposed to like a really long kick. Sometimes you still will have the sub bass be competing with each other, and there won't be room for both the sub frequencies from the kick and the sub frequencies from the 808s. There are a few things you can do in that situation, and what you actually decide to do, of course, is going to depend on the circumstance and the actual sounds you use and the mix you have. First thing you could try to do is cut back on the sub frequencies on the 808. Now, if your 808 is really thuddy, if it has a big thud and then the sub drops down, if you cut back on the bass, then what happens is the residual bass is going to disappear. So sometimes that's not what you want to do. So the second thing you could do is you could actually cut the sub frequency on the actual kick. And so this works really well if you have an 808 that already has that thud in the sub bass. But if your 808 is compressed or it's really flat in the sub, then by cutting the sub and the kick, you're going to lose a lot of that big thud on that lower end. So depending on what kick and what 808 you have, you might want to try this option or the previous one. Another solution, and this goes in a different direction from the last two, is to just to duck out or to cut out completely the bass while the kick plays. And then when the kick is done playing, bring back the bass. So I've bounced out my kick and 808 tracks into audio files to help visualize this. And so what you could do is you could actually, everywhere there's a kick, you could actually go in and make a cut. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but then you could just select all of these.